take over the session.
Thank you very much. First of all, let me thank Salim Saab for organizing this lecture. I should also thank the Presidency College for considering my name. Uh, Let me start by apologizing to all the senior academics if they have joined, that my lecture today or my talk today would be very basic. I won't actually be going into the intricacies of the medieval Indian architecture because Salim Saab gave me the brief that I have to talk about the entire medieval period and tell the students about the basics of the architecture as it prevailed during that period of time. As you may know that if I start going into any of the details, it needs a number of hours to complete uh, 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 and to talk about what this medieval Indian architecture was. And that is why today I just selected a theme which is basic elements of medieval Indian architecture. Uh, in other words, what we would be doing through the 40, 50 minutes or whatever time I take, we would be dealing with the techniques, the material, certain important architectural elements, as well as some of the preferred plans during the medieval period. In this, we would be dealing both the Sultanate as well as the Mughal period. Let us start this topic by putting up this question: what is medieval Indian architecture? Although a very simple question, but there are very complex answers to it. There was a time when the medieval Indian architecture was known as Saracenic architecture. Would it be correct to call it that? Incidentally, in the last few decades, this term is not very popular. To tell these students, Saracenic just means anything which is concerned with the Arabs. You know it well that the Arab, profess Islam, and the depiction of life, animals, human beings, that's looked down upon. For example, in the Indian context, you would get sculptures, you would get a depiction of life. But as far as the architecture which was developing under the Arab influence was concerned, the Saracenic architecture was concerned, and this was incidentally a term given by the Europeans, the idols, sculptures, depiction of life was missing. So that was one of the terms which was put forward, and it was said that the Indian architecture was in fact Saracenic architecture. And from that also, there was another derivative, Indo-Saracenic. Indo-Saracenic actually was applied by our colonial masters to a typical type of architecture which started developing from 18th century onwards, where there was a mixture of the British, the Indian elements. So it started being called as Indo-Saracenic. Typical example would be the Lucknow architecture. But then sometimes the term Indo-Saracenic was also applied to the entire gamut of architecture which came to be established in India from the Sultanate period onwards. Another very, very popular term which has been used is Islamic architecture. They generally say there are certain books which have been written in which it is claimed that medieval Indian architecture was nothing but Islamic architecture. Now, how would you define the various types of temples which were constructed during this medieval period? How would you call them Islamic for that matter? I'm not going into the details of that, but in one of my articles, I have tried to argue that even the term Islamic is very problematic. Islam would invoke a religion, and I believe that architecture has no religion. Sometimes there are certain features which are identified as Muslim. There are certain features which are, identified as Hindu. That is a very, wrong type of identification. Suffice to say that the dome is not Muslim, the trabeate is not Hindu. So this term also should not be applied, the Islamic. So would be the case with the term Indo-Islamic. Indo-Islamic would mean that Islamic architecture which was used in the Indian subcontinent. So there were many aspects which had nothing to do with Islam, but were prevalent during the medieval period in India. And it was not only the religious structures which were being built. So again, just like Islamic, the term Indo-Islamic is also a term which I feel that should not be used. The actual term with which we should stick with is the medieval Indian architecture. Simple. इसको आप ना इस्लाम से जोड़िए ना किसी मजहब से जोड़िए. Don't relate it with the Arabs, don't relate it with Islam. Just call it the medieval Indian architecture because, for example, there are a lot of elements within the Indian architecture which are typically Indian in character and they have got nothing to do with Islam. I don't know whether I'll be able to reach that stage during the lecture or not, but suffice to say here, let me explain it at this particular juncture itself, that sometimes Taj Mahal is supposed to be an Islamic building. There's a misconception among those who read the textbooks. Akbari architecture is supposed to be an architecture which is more inspired by the Indian traditions, whereas the architecture under Shah Jahan, typically the Taj Mahal is taken to be a typical example where there is much Islamic, Central Asian, Iranian influence. I would submit before you that actually it is the opposite. The type of arches, the type of pillars, the type of decorations which are present in the Taj or in the Shah Jahani architecture are more properly speaking derived from the old ancient Buddhist architecture rather than the Central Asian or Iranian. So, in short, I would just recommend to all these students that please, ये जो terms हैं अलग-अलग किताबों में, अलग-अलग textbook में, Saracenic, Islamic, Indo-Islamic, please, stop using them. Simple term जो उसके लिए है which will encompass all the type of buildings, all the type of constructions which were taking place from say 800 onwards down to the establishment of the colonial rule in India. That all period would be represented by a simple term, medieval Indian architecture. Now, having in a way defined the term, let me go to certain of the basics of how to gauge what was medieval. Now, for example, take the material through which the medieval structures were constructed. We know, I mean, before you in this slide, there are a large number of materials which I have put up before you. For example, mud, the simplest of the material, kachi mitti, jiske that terracotta through which the mud walls, the thatched roof, cottages are built. That is one of the materials. Naturally, it was preferred during the earlier periods, but then it also continued during the medieval period, so we can't rule it out. The mud architecture was very much a part of it. Most of the villages, the residential, huts of the villages still continued to be made of mud. So was the wood. Wood was also one of these, material through which the buildings were constructed since time immemorial. We know that from the Mauryan periods onwards, we start getting of wood being used in palatial structures, in gateways, in palisades, in city walls, so on and so forth. The wood continued down to the medieval period. It continued even in the modern period. So wood is one of the material through which the structures. Similar was the stone. We know that most of these structures were built of stone. And, let me not give examples, but starting from the ancient period, coming down to even very late in history, till the 19th century, you would get examples of the stone architecture through the entire history of the country. Something which is written in between the bricks. Bricks was something which, although known during the ancient period, who can forget the Kushana bricks? Who can forget the Mauryan bricks? The brick architecture was very much there. We know that the bricks were used in the most remote parts of the Indian subcontinent, but still, it was during the medieval period that the material brick became one of the preferred materials when it was used along with a new type of mortar which was introduced. In fact, the modern period is symbolized by the introduction of a binding material which is known as lime mortar. All those who have studied a little bit of, archaeology would know that the area of Sindh, where the Muslim invasion, the invasions of the Turks and Ghaznavites occurred much before they started occurring in the Indo-Gangetic plain. In that region, the lime mortar makes its appearance from 10th, 11th century onwards. And we start getting buildings which are made of brick, which are held together with this new type of lime mortar. In the Indo-Gangetic basin, for example, in the area of Agra, in the area of Delhi, the lime mortar was introduced sometime around the 12th century AD and not before that. I would refer to you one of the very important books which have been written by an archaeologist who incidentally was the person who excavated the Babri Masjid at Ayodhya in 2003. Now, he has a book, Delhi at the Threshold. It's a very important book on the history of Delhi, archaeological history of Delhi. Now, he there very perceptively, he writes that as soon as we start getting lime mortar, now we can say that the Rajput period is over and now the Delhi Sultanate has been established. And it is not only B.R. Mani, the name of the archaeologist, the famous archaeologist, he was also the heading the ASI till a few years back. He is also at the moment the Director General of the National Museum of India at Delhi, the person who actually carried out the so-called excavations at Ayodhya and trying to prove that there was a temple out there. But when he wrote his book on Delhi, he wrote it as an archaeologist, and he pointedly states there that the lime mortar is something through which one can distinguish the medieval period. Now, if you read the articles and works which have been done by Professor Irfan Habib, in a number of articles, Irfan Habib too have tried to argue that these two materials, there is a term in North India, I don't know what is that term is in Bengal, Lakhori eat, very small, short, small brick through which most of these medieval structures were built. They were held together by this lime mortar, in which there was an addition of surki, that is, powder of burnt bricks, as well as gypsum. So lime mortar, which was made of fresh lime, which was boiled. Gypsum was added to it, an adhesive material, and surki was added to it. There are a large number of Mughal miniatures where constructional activity has been shown. For example, the Agra fort is shown to be as being built. But the Sikri is shown that building construction out there is taking place. And there are scenes where masons are mixing the mortar, laying out the bricks, transporting the stone material to form the walls of these palatial structures. And where this mortar is being mixed, you can make out that red colored surki, that white lime mortar, and a paste-like thing which is being added to that, which is gypsum. So this, just remember that as soon as you start getting the evidence of lime mortar, gypsum, and surki being used as a binding material to hold the bricks with which the structures were being constructed, we can identify that particular building or structure as a medieval structure. Now, that is as far as I would tell you about the material which is typical of the medieval age in India. Now let us come to the three basic techniques through which buildings are made. Most of you would have heard these terms. Any one of you who has read a bit of architecture would have heard these three terms. Trabeate, which is the simplest of the techniques, where you have two stones forming the wall. On top of that, there is a heavy lateral piece of stone which is kept on top of that. This is a trabeate method, which was the earliest technique through which buildings were being constructed throughout the world, even in India. So in most of the ancient period in India, trabeate is the method which has been employed to make constructions. The second very important technique is the technique which is known as arcuate. Arcuate is a technique where instead of having a flat roof with the lateral stone which is kept on the top, you have the a bow-shaped roofing which is being done, an arch which is being made. I'll come to the arch later on, but this was the arcuate technique, was a very revolutionary technique which was introduced generally in India during the medieval period. Now let me caution you here. Sometimes when Irfan Habib, for example, wrote about this, arch made its appearance during the medieval period. So someone would point out to one particular isolated site and would say, look here, वहाँ पे एक arch बनती. So there are two cautions there. Number one, if something is not being duplicated again and again, it is not being popularized, हो सकता है कहीं उसका इस्तेमाल किया. For example, lime mortar is not totally absent during the ancient period at all. We do have examples of lime mortar being used. Lekin when it is being used in larger quantities, it has been popularized. We say that it was in medieval period that lime mortar became a popular means of construction. Similarly, one may find one or two arch here and there, but basically arcuate is a style which comes to be established. It is only during the period when bricks became popular, when the lime mortar, a new type of adhesive, was discovered, and using these two things, the arcuate style started getting popularized in India. It had a shape of an arch. Now, when both these techniques met each other, Trabeate and arcuate, where the technique remained the old, where that was a lateral piece of stone, I'll explain this. But the shape was new. That type of new, you can say, hybrid, which came to exist, was known as corbelling. The corbel. तो अगर आप टेक्निक वाइज जाइएगा कौन ज्यादा डेवलप्ड है कौन थोड़ा क्रूड है तो उसमें what we should say is that Trabeate, corbelled and arcuate, because corbelled is also sometimes known as false arch. For example, in the Qutub Minar complex, the Qubbatul Islam, that has been used, where the shape is of an arch, but actually the thing which is being constructed is still the old method. Now, before you, I am just showing you a slide for you, all those who are new to architecture, to understand what is Trabeate, for example. This is Stonehenge monument. It has nothing to do with India, but a very good example to show what is Trabeate. Where imagine that these, vertical pieces of stones are the walls, and those horizontal pieces of stones are big slabs. Imagine them to be the roofs. And this is how Trabeated entrances are being made, Trabeated structures are being made. What is happening here is that the full weight of the stone on the top is falling on the pillars or on the wall itself. So much so that when there is so much of pressure, the result would be that the structure would come down. From India, I am giving you this example from the Qubbatul Islam Mosque, where you see this, galleries of the mosque with the shafts of the temple pillars, two shafts of a pillar kept on top of the other to give the requisite height, and on top of that you have these Trabeated roofs where the pressure of all these roofs would be falling below. Or for that matter, another example where it is much more clear for you to see. This is from Rajasthan. It is from near Ajmer. Adhai Din Ka Jhopra. A mosque which was constructed soon after the Qubbatul Islam Mosque. Qubbatul Islam Mosque was started during the period of Qutbuddin Aibak, but then added upon during the period of Iltutmish. Now this Adhai Din Ka Jhopra, this particular mosque at Ajmer, is built during the period of Iltutmish. See how the roofings have been done. See how the pillars are supporting the roof, these stone slabs which are resting on these pillars. And what are these pillars? They are again the temple shafts. If at Quwwatul Islam Mosque there were two shafts, one atop the other, here you find three shafts kept one on top of the other, and on top of that there is a frame of stone slabs, and on that you have the beams, and on the beams you have the stone slabs forming the roof. If you remove one of the pillars, the roof would fall. Imagine if this roof was of wood, then what would happen? I don't know whether you have seen it or not. All those who have got some 18th or 19th century, old type of bungalows in your villages with, wooden roofs, you would have seen that the roof, caves in. It becomes bent from the top like this. And so to hold it, you again have to put up a new pillar so that the roof doesn't fall. Because the full weight of this type of a roofing is on the walls and on the pillars. In the corbelled arch, the same defect remains. One more thing which I would like to point out, that in this old trabeated method, what is happening is that large, expansive halls, open halls cannot be built. There would be halls which are pillared. But large open structures cannot be built. Very high structures cannot be built. If you have a corbelled arch, in other words, if you ask the mason to make an arch, he only knows the trabeate way. This is how he would make an arch. This is the technique which has been used in the Quwwatul Islam Mosque, for example. There, what the architect is doing is, what the mason is doing is, he is basically staggering each and every stone piece. जो एक फ्लैट रूफ थी उसको उसने वेरियस स्टेजेस में स्टेप्स में स्टैगर कर दिया है, बट द अल्टीमेट रिजल्ट इज द सेम. द वेट ऑफ द सीलिंग और द वेट ऑफ द आर्च और द वेट ऑफ द dome, conical dome, for example, here you see the conical domes. They are also built on the same technique.
Sir, may I interrupt you? We are not able to see your PowerPoint, sir.
Why?
I don't know, sir, because I just now we realize that you are continuously showing the PowerPoint, but it is not presented.
Sorry, sir. Sorry, start representing.
Is it now visible?
Sorry, start representing.
Present now, sir.
Is it? Can you see it?
No.
No, sir.
Sir, not yet.
Sorry, start representing.
Start what?
Present now,
Representing.
Sir.
Present.
How to do that?
Professor Rizvi, if you look at the bottom, if you scroll your mouse at the bottom of your screen,
Yes.
your feet on the bottom right, there's a little button that says present now.
Okay.
At the very bottom, do you see where there's the microphone, the little telephone icon, and then the video? Yes, there we go.
Yes.
Is it coming?
Yes.
Yes, sir.
Oh my God. So why didn't you tell me in the beginning?
No, sir, we are not, मतलब पहले समझ
Thank
में
you,
नहीं
sir.
आया कि हाथ जो है वो बार-बार बटन पे जा रहा है, तब समझ में आया कि नहीं आप तो प्रेजेंट कर रहे हैं.
There we go.
So is it now available?
Yes, it is. Thank you, sir.
Yes, sir. अब आप सर वो कर दीजिए.
I need not explain this. You have. I mean, this is, for example, from the Stonehenge, which I was just talking about, for you to understand.
सर स्लाइड शो कर दीजिएगा थोड़ा सा ताकि वो हो जाए.
हाँ, एक मिनट. Fine.
जी सर, फाइन.
Now, what happened?
Sir, you're present to everyone.
Is it visible?
हाँ, अब है सर. Now it is
Okay.
visible.
Now, for example, here is the slide where I was talking about the Qubbat al-Islam Sahan, the courtyard and the galleries around it, where the temple pillars have been used to have a flat roof on them. You can see the beams on which the trabeated roof is resting, and you can see the conical domes. This is what I was talking about. Now here was the the Adhai Din Ka Jhopla, where what I told you is that if the slide is visible to you, that three pillar shafts have been used to give the height to the chamber. What I said was that in this striated structure, large halls, open halls cannot be built. For example, here what you can see is it's just a pillared hall. Beams hai, and you can see the shafts, and you have a flat roof. The whole weight of the roof is resting on these pillars. Now here the corbelled arch, where now the trabeate roof has been given the shape of an arch. It is not an arch proper, it's a false arch. Because here the flat roof has been staggered into various levels. Each level of the, just protruding stones, one atop the other, so much so that at this level, it's filled up. But the weight of each and every piece is still falling on the walls of the structure. So that is one of the basic defects, that very expansive structures cannot be built, and shikhars can be built through this method. And we know that a number of shikharas in the temples were built. In Quwwatul Islam Mosque, the same trabeate roof was built. For example, as I said, that ancient India, here is a typical example. You see this, and you can find it here. This is the shape of an arch, but this is not an arch proper. It's a corbelled arch, where the weight of each and every stone piece is falling on the walls of the structure itself. The same technique you will find in this Quwwatul Islam Mosque, the screen of the Quwwatul Islam Mosque. This arch has the shape of an arch, but if you look closely, the same type of technique has been used as it has been used here. तो यहाँ पे भी जो आर्च का फॉर्म दे दिया गया है, लेकिन टेक्निक वही पुरानी है जो चल रही है. फॉर एग्जाम्पल, अगेन इन अढ़ाई दिन का झोपड़ा, again you will find that apparently it appears to be an arch with arabesque with Quranic verses written all over it, floral designs, and so on and so forth. But the technique remains the same, where protruding stones, one step yahan par yahan tak, फिर एक layer which is protruding forward, another layer which is again protruding further forward, and in the same fashion this dome is being constructed. So here, for example, जो उसमें नजर नहीं आ रहा था carving की वजह से, you can see it in this particular arch, typical Sultanate period arch, but a corbelled arch. The same type of arch which is found in Qubbatul Islam, which is formed in Adhai Din Ka Jhopla and the earlier buildings. Here, as you can see, that each piece of stone, जो subsequent जो layers हैं, वो बाहर की तरफ निकाल के रखी गई हैं, and ultimately on the top you have a piece which covers it all. So you have the shape of an arch, but the technique remains the old trabeate one, where the full weight of this whole area would be falling on the structure itself. The true arch, on the other hand, the preferred mode of construction during the medieval period, was this radiating arch. An arch in which the weight of the stones radiated in all sort of directions, where there were two types of stones which were used. the keystone, which is almost, triangular shaped, which stops these two spans, which are formed by stones which are known as voisers. These are also, wedge-shaped pieces of stones. Each wedge-shaped piece of stone is held together by this keystone. If you remove this keystone, the whole structure would collapse. But till this triangular piece of stone is there, this type of, arch would remain standing. So now you can give a breadth, कितना भी बड़ा चौड़ा लंबा हॉल आपको चाहिए हो, using this true arch, this radiating arch, you can have the span of the room, you can give the height, depend करता है कि voicers में कितना आप उसको edge दे रहे हैं, उसका wedge कितना है, कितना ज़्यादा है, कितना कम है. So you can accordingly shape your building. It is also the same technique through which the domes started being constructed. Here again, you find an example, the comparison of a false arch and a true arch. How the pieces of stones would be used in a false arch and then in a true arch. Now, one of the first structures in medieval period where we encounter the true arch is this building, which is known as the tomb of Sultan Balban. It was constructed around 1287. It survives. This particular photograph was taken by me only around 2 years back. And as you can see here, that here a true arch has been made. And then we will also see that although the dome has disappeared, but the dome over this building was also of the true variety. However, the first intact building where both the arch and the dome survive is this Alai Darwaza, which is situated very near to the Qutub Minar. This is built during the period of Alauddin Khalji. Here you can say that this is the first surviving true dome which exists in the Indian, you can say under the Sultanate, Delhi Sultanate period in North India. Now, in other words, there are three types of architectural elements: the arch, the vault, and the dome. I have already shown that this was the arch, one of the first arches from the Sultanate period, from the tomb of Sultan Balban, which is near the Qutub complex. It is in the archaeological park, and as is very visible here, that voisers and a keystone have been used to make these type of arches. Or for example, this is a typical decorated arch portion of a building which survives in Jaunpur, the Sharqi architecture, again Sultanate period, a little late, 15th century, but again we find that now full-fledged true arches, as well as here you find the old trabeated entrances are being used in the same building. It was one of the peculiar features of the Tughlaq architecture which continued to be followed by the Sharqis. And in Sharqi architecture, the Tughlaq architecture had a very great influence. So in spite of a few differences, for example, high propylons, such square type of bastions on the sides. Most of the other features during this Sharqi period remained those which were preferred during the Tughlaq period. Now, as far as the arches during the Mughal period is concerned, some change took place after the establishment of the Mughal Empire, and a new type of an arch came to be established. You see, कि अगर आप compare करें, for example, this arch and here, this type of an arch is a typical Iranian arch, which is also known, as a four-centered arch. It was from the period of Akbar. It was used to such a large extent that actually people forgot that it had Iranian origins, and it came to be known popularly as the Mughal arch. It was a four-centered. आप देख इसकी चौड़ाई देखिए. अगर आप यहाँ के ऊपर अपना एक वो रखें, कंपास, और यहाँ से एक सर्कल बनाए, तो यहाँ के ऊपर एक बनेगा, एक यहाँ बनेगा, और फिर यहाँ का जो डायमेंशंस हैं वो अलग हैं. So in fact, this is there are four centers in this arch, and that is why it is known as a four-centered arch, which was first perfected in Iran, but from Iran it was borrowed by the Mughal architects, and throughout, for example, here in Humayun's tomb, you will find all these arches, being made, and under Akbar, they were used so profusely that by the end of the 50 years reign of Akbar, people started calling it as the Mughal arch. But then under Shah Jahan, a new variety of arches started developing, which are known as multifoliated arches, which had cusps within them. Remember, and there is a lotus flower which is made here, here. At every point where you would find where the arch culminates, you will find a lotus, flower being depicted. This particular multifoliated arch is derived from Buddhist architecture. जो चैत्य विंडोज का जो फॉर्म हुआ करता था, ये वहां से, और ये बुद्धिस्ट आर्किटेक्चर में ये यूज की गई थी. They are derived from that particular ancient Indian architecture. But now, although they were derived from ancient Indian architecture, but now they were made in a new form, so that now these cusp multifoliated arches came to be known as Shah Jahani arches. And as you can see, that there are small cusps. All these cusps are made by using the voicers, and ultimately here they culminate in a flower. There are certain these type of arches which are Egyptian forms of arches, but again derived from the Chaitya windows. They were used during the period of Shah Jahan. They are not found under Akbar. तो एक तरीके से वही आर्च जो एक कॉर्बेल्ड आर्च से शुरू हुई थी, वो बढ़ते बढ़ते what we find is that a number of types of arches started being made. And then, of course, as far as domes are concerned, there were not only domes but vaults which were made using this particular technique of architecture. Now, for example, here you find that here, this is the entrance to the Red Fort of Delhi, where there is a market. Now this has been, renovated, and its old glory has been, given back to it by the ASI, which has cleaned it from all the 19th and 20th century plasters and cement which was used to cover these places. But mark here that this is how new type of ceilings were given using these arches, intersecting arches, which formed small vaults in between, and a series of vaults were used to give form to a passage. Similarly here, this is a painting. This is from the Sultanate period. It is from the Adina Mosque in Bengal. But again, you find that here again, once again, the type of vaulting which came to be established. And here is the vault of a temple at Vrindavan, the Gobind Dev temple, one of the very famous temples which were built during the reign of Akbar. Here also we find that we will come to another slide, but here also these vaultings were accomplished. And then of course the domes. What we have is these early period domes of the Sultanate period, the Khalji period domes, followed by you will find that there is no kalasha on top of this, but then here a sort of a kalash starts making an appearance. In Punjab we have domes which are you can say early period of the establishment of the Mughal Empire. This particular structure is in Sirhind, and here instead of a kalash you have a Roshandan. Incidentally, in the only surviving mosque of Babur's period, the Kabuli Bagh Mosque at Panipat, there also instead of a kalash over the dome we have this Roshandan, where you can see a small cupola with spaces in between from through which the air and light could enter into the room. These were type of domes and preferred Roshandans which were found in the Central Asian architecture, and there are 2 or 3 surviving examples, all in the region of Punjab. One in Haryana, for example, Kabuli Bagh Mosque is now Haryana, although it was also once upon a time part of Punjab. तो वहाँ के ऊपर कलश के अलावा earlier period में this is how, but later on what we find is a particular type of a derivative from the temple architecture, the kalasha, which was added to the dome. What we also find is that from such type of domes, ultimately the dome transformed into, for example, during the period of the Tughlaqs, there is a particular structure in Delhi now in a very dilapidated condition known as the tomb of Khane Jahan Telangani, and there for the first time we start getting a double dome, which was further developed in the tomb of Humayun, and the most perfect form of a double dome was found as the Taj Mahal. And in this double dome, what you can see is that there is an inner shell which is commensurate to the room over which it is being built, and the outer shell of the dome, which is lighter. The actual dome is here, architectural dome. This is just a shell, outer shell, and this outer shell gives a balance to the building from outside. So now from the Mughal period onwards, in most of the monumental structures which are also octagonal in shape, we start getting a new type of domes, which are, double domes. Some of these double domes, for example, at the Taj, which is now before you, is a bulbous dome. It's just like a guava-shaped dome, which we start getting in its perfect form. The neck of the dome actually hides the inner shell of the actual dome. And there is a space in between. There is a door, in fact, it has been now since been closed, but if you want, you can go, if ASI allows you, you can even go and walk up this space, because this is all vacant. So this outer shell becomes light, and it is not at all surprising that for 300 or 400 years, जो एक dome इतना भारी और बड़ा नजर आता है, actually it is quite light, and that is why it survives for such a long period of time. Let me come now to certain of the mosque plans. There are a number of varieties of mosques, the plans which entered into the Indian subcontinent. The initial mosque plans, one of the first, as you know, is the Qubbatul Islam Mosque at Delhi. Now, especially the mosques which were built in the Indo-Gangetic Basin, this area, Agra, Delhi, they are all mosques which have a particular plan. A centrally located courtyard, on the western side the main chamber, the main Liwan, the prayer chamber, and then on the other three sides there are galleries or verandas or chambers with openings, gateways given to it. This type of a plan is an Iranian style of plan, an Iranian mosque plan, where there is a centrally located courtyard with constructions on all the sides. This is the form of a mosque plan which you would find, for example, at Qubbatul Islam Mosque or the other mosques in North India. Then there was another type of a plan which came to exist in India, especially from the period of Firoz Shah Tughlaq, the multi-courtyard plan, where now there was no central courtyard at all, but there were multiples of courtyards. For example, in most of these Firoz Shah Tughlaq mosques in Delhi, you find 4 courtyards. And around all those 4 courtyards, you will find constructions. So much so that the courtyard comes in the center of the building itself. They were known as the multi-courtyard plan. And then in certain areas, for example, in Bengal, you know that in Bengal Sultanate, from 12th century onwards up till the period of Aurangzeb, there was a Bengal Sultanate, sometimes independent, sometimes under the control of the Mughals. Actually, from Akbar's period onwards, the Bengal Sultanate was no more there, but their architecture, which had been established during the Sultanate of Bengal, continued in that area. The special typical examples of that you will find in the modern district of Malda, for example, in India. Bangladesh में भी वो मिलता है, लेकिन इंडिया में अगर आप देखेंगे, in your place where you live, go to district Malda, in Gaur and Pandwa Sharif, you will find those mosques, and you will find that unlike the North Indian mosques, these mosques are structures without any courtyard. Courtyard, yeah, open space is there outside it, but it is not a centrally located courtyard around which the mosques are built. And then lastly, I would also discuss with you, that in India, especially from the Mughal period onwards, typical type of mosques came to be established in the Indian subcontinent, which are not found anywhere outside the Indian subcontinent. By Indian subcontinent, all of you know that one would include countries like India itself, Pakistan, बांग्लादेश, ये जो पूरा एरिया था जो इंडियन सब कॉन्टिनेंट के नाम से जाना जाता था, वहाँ एक वैरायटी मॉस्क की मिलती है और उस टाइप की मॉस्क्स you won't get outside. For example, you go to Iran, Central Asia, or anywhere in the world. Once you leave this boundary of the Indian subcontinent, though this type of mosque you will not get, and that is why, very hesitantly, but I use the term Templar mosques, because here there are certain features which were borrowed from the local Indian temple traditions. For example, you would find all of you know, जब भी हम लोग मॉस्क की बात करते हैं, whether it is the Jama Masjid of Fatehpur Sikri or that of Delhi or that of Lahore or that of Banaras or that of any place in Rajasthan or Aligarh or anywhere, all these mosques, the larger varieties, have triple domes, 3 domes, with the central dome being higher than the other two domes. So what I say is that this was a type of a design which is derived from the Indian concept of Trinity, where the triple is there. Secondly, in these mosques, Indian variety of mosques, which came to be established from the Mughal period onwards, there is a hierarchy. At the lowest level is the area outside the mosque. Then you climb these steps, you come to the courtyard. From the courtyard, there are another step of series of steps, although not more than 5 or 6, 3 to 5 you may say. But again, there is at a higher level the prayer chamber, the western prayer chamber, the Liwan of the mosque. The Liwan of the mosque itself would be divided into 3 sections. You would find a central portion, the central area of the mosque, with a larger arch, a larger dome, a higher ceiling, which is flanked by 2 aisles, the nave in between, and the 2 aisles. The aisles are also surmounted with domes, but those 2 domes are lower than the central one. So a hierarchy. The western portion of the mosque, the highest, the western central portion, the highest, the side portions, single storied, and the courtyard, at the lowest, but below the courtyard, the actual ground outside the mosque. So these typical type of mosques are known as, what I start calling them as, Templar mosques, because such type of mosques are not found outside the Indian subcontinent. But let me start with this variety, which is the Iranian style of mosques. For example, before you is the Adhai Din Ka Thopra at Ajmer, a square centrally located courtyard. The sides have disappeared. Only the western chamber remains of the western chamber, and the screen fronting it remains. But as whatever remains, you can see that it was the square, structure, which was typical of a variety of mosques derived from 8th century Iranian mosques, which were known as Chahar Tak mosques. ये बिल्कुल वही ईरानियन जो कंसेप्ट है उसी को बोरो करके हिंदुस्तान में ये बनाया गया था. और फॉर दैट मैटर, दिस इज from Fatehpur Sikri, the mosque of Fatehpur Sikri, typically square in form. Look here, total square, चारों तरफ buildings, single storied galleries all around. The prayer chamber surmounted with 3 domes, the central dome higher, the other domes lower. The Buland Darwaza, the Badshahi Darwaza, bastions on the sides, but a square between you can see the tomb of Salim Chishti here and the tomb of his son here. I'm not going into the details of this, but remember what I am trying to show is that all these mosques are derived from the Iranian style. और यही एक mosque जो आपको मैं दिखा रहा हूँ, this is also a typical example of a Templar mosque, which I have just explained to you. Tughlaq period mosque, for example, here is one of the mosques of the Tughlaq period in Delhi. Multiplicity of domes, a typical tradition of Central Asia. And then here you find these squares. These are open courtyards. One, two, behind this, and here. For example, in this plan, it is much more clearer. Here, these squares represent the open courtyards, and these areas are the built areas. Double-storied structure. The lower story is just a platform. The actual mosque is on top of that. Multiplicity of domes. For example, there is one mosque having 80 such domes surmounting it, and then 4 courtyards. This was a typical style which came to be established under Firoz Shah Tughlaq, and there are a number of such mosques which survive. And then all of you, most of you belong to Bengal, which I could gather from the names which were coming on my screen. So there are these, mosques are from Gaur, Chota Sona, and another mosque whose name I am forgetting. You can see the plans. Multiples of domes with no courtyard, just a quadrangle which is enclosed. Remember the climate of the region, because it is the region where much rainfall takes place. North India is the region where you need air as well as sunlight during the winters, but here you need more protection. So here in the region of Bengal, this is the type of mosque you will find almost throughout the region of Bengal. From Bangladesh down to the Indian Bengal, you will find the same type of mosque, which is very different from the mosques which were built during the Sultanate period in North India or during the Mughal period in North India. Now, as I said, the Templar mosques, even the mosque which I had showed earlier, the Fatehpur Sikri mosque, is also belonging to the same variety. The gradation is there, the steps are there, how from low you go to the divine step by step, one step at a time, you reach the ultimate pinnacle. So here also you find, for example, this is in Lahore, Aurangzeb's mosque, Badshahi Mosque at Lahore. It's all below. You can see the gate here, large number of steps from below which you climb, and you reach the Sehen. And from the courtyard, you again you have to climb 3 steps to go inside the prayer chamber. Prayer chamber again divided into 2 aisles and a central nave. The central nave, in front of that is a very high, arch, a propylon, and the dome you can see is higher, bigger, is flanked by 2 smaller domes, and all around you find the minarets. Let me also point out here that one of the symbols of modern mosque in India, there are 2 symbols of modern mosque in India, the dome and the minaret. But you will be surprised to know that as far as North Indian mosques are concerned, even Bengal, you won't find any, minarets related with that. Quwwatul Islam Mosque, there is one minaret that is known as Qutub Minar, which is a structure unrelated with the structure of the mosque. It is situated outside the mosque, original mosque. Ultimately, it was incorporated within, but it was a freestanding minaret. It had nothing to do with the structure itself. It was a Maizana tower. I won't go into the details of that. But starting from there, coming up till the reign of Jahangir, there is no mosque where, especially under the Mughals or the North Indian tradition, Sultanate to the Mughals, that you would encounter any minaret at all. The minaret for the first time makes its appearance in the Jama Masjid of Agra, a mosque which was built by Jahanara Begum during the reign of Shah Jahan. Stunted minarets, hesitant minarets, but for the first time. In full-fledged form, the minaret would appear in the Jama Masjid at New Delhi, and then, as you can see, this is an image of a most beautiful mosque of the Mughals. Incidentally, it is from the reign of Aurangzeb. Generally, what we are told is that Aurangzeb's period was the period of decline, nothing happened. This most beautiful structure of a mosque was built during the period of Aurangzeb, the Badshahi mosque. It is not of Shah Jahan. And here you would find high minarets, 4 minarets. Delhi ki Jama Masjid mein bhi, there are only 2 minarets. In Banaras, you know that there is a mosque which is related with Aurangzeb. High slender minarets on top of that, which are there. So in fact, minarets associated with mosque structures make their beginning only from the period of Shah Jahan onwards. And as in these places, for example, where I am saying the Templar mosques, you will find कि जो एक Indian hierarchy है, चाहे वो it's of our society, of our Indian philosophy, the concept of Brahma, Vishnu, Mahesh, you call it in any fashion, you will find it reflected in the mosque architecture, especially of the Mughal variety. Here again, you find this is the mosque of Delhi from the front. Hierarchies are very apparent and clear in this. The minarets are clear. The central pylon is clear. The high dome is clear. The central nave, which is much more decorated from inside also, it's very clear. So, such type of hierarchies, and that is why, as I said, that all these mosques are, although basically derived from Iranian architecture, but Indian elements start getting into it, giving it a new form. As far as the tombs are concerned, from the very first tomb, for example, here you find the tomb of Sultan Ghari, the first tomb which was built after the establishment of the Delhi Sultanate, the son of Sultan Iltutmish. And here also, from the first tomb, the structure was generally of a square building. Sultan Ghari, as you can see here, it's a whole structure which is square, but in here you don't have any construction except of a platform. The actual tomb is inside. It's the subterraneous. तो दो चीजें यहाँ establish हुई. एक square tomb बना. दूसरे पहले ही tomb से एक चीज और which came to be established was that generally the actual grave would always be situated within the ground, not above the ground. Above the ground, you would only see the replica. So here, Sultan Ghari, the actual structure is square with a rectangle, with a octagonal platform in between. It represents the burial chamber which is situated below. This is the tomb of Iltutmish, again square. If you come to the and again the actual grave of Iltutmish is not here. It is in the subterraneous chamber under the ground. And you would find this, that throughout the Khalji period, the tomb of Alauddin Khilji, any you name tomb of any sultan which you name, they were generally during the Khalji period, even in fact till the beginning of the Tughlaq period, they were generally square. The first octagonal tomb was the tomb of Khane-e-Jahan Telangani, which I have already mentioned. It is in a very bad shape today. It's all surrounded from all the sides. It is octagonal with chhatris, just like here, this tomb which you find here, which is of the Sayyid period. In the Lodi tomb, you find cupolas surrounding a central dome and with verandas surrounding the central chamber. So octagonal tombs started from Khane-e-Jahan Telangani, the Sayyid and the Lodi periods. During the Sayyid and the Lodi periods, generally now what started happening was that square tomb now meant a tomb of a noble, and from Sayyid and Lodi period onwards, the octagonal tomb was generally preferred for the Sultan. And from the period of Mughals, this octagonal tomb became the preferred style. I will come to what the actual ground plan of this was, but this was the first monumental structure. ये सब बहुत छोटे-छोटे structures हैं. The monumentality to architecture was given under the Mughals. You can see that it is in fact formed as a square with chamfering on the sides. It's known as Musamman-e-Baghdadi, an irregular octagon. An octagon is something which has 8 equal sides. For example, here in this tomb, all sides are equal to each other. But in a new type of a plan, which came to be preferred under the Mughals, it was Musamman-e-Baghdadi, the octagon which was irregular, with 4 sides smaller and 4 sides larger. Here at Humayun's tomb, and then the same thing at the Taj, and then the last tomb of Safdarjung appears to be square, but in its planning, it is once again, octagonal in form. As far as the temples are concerned, generally when we talk about the medieval period, we miss out on the temples. I don't know why. I mean, we try to show that as if only mosques and tombs and palaces were constructed. No, a large number of temples were also constructed during the medieval period, and one of the most famous temples is the Gobind Dev temple at Vrindavan. I can assure you, this is from the outside, this is from the inside view, and if you go to that temple blindfolded, and if I release your blindfolds only after you have entered this, you would imagine that you are standing in some Mughal monument, for example at Fatehpur Sikri. बिल्कुल वही architecture जो imperial Mughals का architecture था. That was the architecture which was used by Man Singh and the other Rajputs when they were constructing these temples. Now this is the plan, a new type of a plan where the church, planning, in fact, the very large, cross-shaped vault is in the center. It's a cross-shaped building and a new type of architecture, and the decorations and the vaultings, intersecting arches. I'll come to that. You can see here that one arch going like this, another intersecting here. These are the new type of things which was used even in the temple architecture. I'll just remind, these are the times when we are talking more and more of temples. You go to Ayodhya, recently you must have seen images on your TV of that foundation ceremony which took place at Ayodhya. But before that ceremony took place, they would have shown you, the sites near the river Saryu, that beautiful, series of temples which are built along the river Saryu. जिनको डेकोरेट किया गया था, all those temples, if you remember or you go back and check them on the net, they are all having domes, not shikhars. They are all typically Muslim architecture, which you would find, because most of them, represent the architecture of the period in which they were being constructed. Now, as far as the architectural Mughal plans are concerned, the first one is Chahar Bagh. That was for the first time introduced in India by Babur. Here, I am depicting before you the famous Bagh-e-Fath, Babur's garden, which he constructed after his victory over Rana Sanga at Kanwa, battleground of Kanwa. Now it is a part of Fatehpur Sikri. This low ground which you see, barren ground, is the place where the lake of Sikri is situated, and just besides that lake of Sikri, Babur built this garden. If you are standing on the ground, you will not be able to make out you are standing in a garden. But if you go on top of the hill from where this photograph has been taken, the whole, four-quartered garden with a platform in between, the water channels dividing it into four parts are visible. Now here on this side is one of the Shalimar gardens at Kashmir, stepped garden in the hilly regions. This was the typical Timurid garden which they encountered in Central Asia, and it was the same design which they incorporated in the Indian gardens where they started building. And that Indian garden became a site for most of the tombs, most of the structures, which were, in fact, the whole town of Agra came to be known as, a garden town. Abakosh, you read Abakosh. Agra is a plan which is the focal point of which is the Chahar Baghs, which are laid out besides the river Jamna at Agra. Now, among the buildings, the plan which is preferred, there are two. One is Chahar Takh. I have already referred that Chahar Takh is the plan of a mosque. For example, here you find the plan of a number of mosques. This is the mosque of Humayun at Kachpura, Babur's mosque at Panipat. Again, a number of structures, and here the famous or infamous Babri Masjid of Ayodhya, which was demolished. In each of them, one point, and here it is a bigger of the same thing, what you find is that instead of pillars, very heavy bastions on the four sides and forming a square in between, and on top of that, using intersecting arches, a circular dome has been laid. This is the particular Chahar Takh design, which one finds in most of these mosques. For example, here the same design. Here also in the Kabuli Bagh Mosque is the plan of the Kabuli Bagh Mosque. Here also the same Chahar Takh pattern has been used. Here also you will find the same type of design, and also here in these particular Central Asian mosque. This is in fact at Samarkand. The same type of a plan is found, and here this is the Jama Masjid plan of the Jama Masjid at Shahjahanabad, Delhi, which you have just seen. Here also the same type of a Chahar Takh plan has been used. So among the mosque architecture, the Chahar Takh plan became the most preferred plan. The Khurasanian wall, intersecting arch. What I had shown you at the Gobind Dev temple, here I think it would be much more clearer to you how there are intersecting arches which have been used to convert a square chamber into octagonal, and then from octagon to a circle at the top. So this, I'm not going into the details. It's a very complex Khurasanian vaulting system. As the name suggests, This type of a vaulting is derived from Iranian architecture. Here also you find in one of these structures in Lahore the same type of vaulting, muqarnas designs and intersecting arches. These are देखिए एक आर्च करके ये जो जिससे ये रेस बन जाती है, the same type of things which is used. This is one of the preferred plans as far as the Mughals. And as far as the secular as well as religious structures are concerned, the most preferred plan throughout the Mughal period was a plan which is known as Hasht Bahisht. It is a non-apartheid plan. A plan in which there are 9 chambers. A centrally located chamber surrounded by 8 on the sides. For example, here, this is the plan of the Humayun's Maqbara, but here you would find there are 4 octagons, separate octagons joined by these rectangular pavilions. यानी 4 अलग-अलग octagon को लेके amalgamate कर दिया गया है, forming a central chamber and 4 octagonal chambers on the corners and 4 side chambers. So 8 chambers, out of which 4 are rectangular and 4 are octagonal. The octagonal chambers are double-storied, surmounted with cupola. The side chambers on the cardinal directions, north, south, east, west, these are chambers which are rectangular in form. The central chamber in between is again a full octagon surmounted with a large dome. So and this plan was used in square buildings, for example at Etmatud Dawla, but the inner planning was the same with 9 chambers. Or for example a monument at Lahore known as Anarkali. This is actually Neeli Gumbad, but in Anarkali's tomb, which is also similarly built. This one is also Neeli Gumbad in Delhi, but a very similar monument in Lahore, Anarkali's tomb, that is also having the same type of a plan. This is the plan of a particular hammam in Burhanpur. Again, it's a half octagon, but with the same inner planning. Specific आधा इधर का गायब है, and then the Taj. Now the difference between the plan of Humayun's tomb and the Taj is that here there were 4 different octagons joined together. Here it is only 1 octagon which has been divided into 9 parts. Here you can see the whole planning that this particular tomb of Humayun, which is built on the Hasht Bahisht plan, the non-apartheid plan, is situated within a Chahar Bagh, a Mughal garden. A garden which is divided just like a grid into squares of 4. A large, bulbous central dome with cupolas on each of the side chambers. The side chambers being these ones being double-storied. These rectangular ones here, they have been used as portals all around. In the Taj, as you can see, the difference from Humayun's tomb in the plan of the basic structure. Now instead of 4 different octagons joined, there is a single chamfered irregular octagon internally divided into similar type of chambers. Another difference you would find between Humayun's tomb and the Taj. At the Humayun's tomb, the tomb is in the center of the garden. Here it is removed to a side besides the river. So ये कहा गया कि here to give depth to the structure, you have it shifted towards one side Actually, the fact is that this particular type of a garden continues on the other side. Now today it is known as Bahtab Bagh. In between is the river, and after the river, you again have a very similar garden which was constructed on the other side, and this was the culmination of Mughal architecture. But then the decline started. But even as far as the decline was concerned, one of the last structures to be made was the tomb of Safdarjung. And here, although the same type of things are not found, but still the Hush Bahish plan, the location of the tomb in the center of the garden, the bulbous dome, the bulbous double dome, the chhatris derived from Rajasthani and Indian architecture. These divisions here, this type of designing which is being given here, the type of articulation which has been given here is again derived from Iranian architecture. So we can say that the Mughal architecture started from Babur's period down to Safdarjung's period. There was much development. There were many continuities. Naturally, everything cannot be told in one particular lecture. So let me stop here. Let me say there is much more to architecture. We are only touching the surface just like laymen. So thank you very much. I hope that I didn't bore you more than what was needed. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. It was a very informative and illuminating lecture. The session is now open to take questions, if any. Please ask questions one by one.
There is a question which I could see, that why did Minar came only during the period of Jahangir? Minaret in the mosque architecture never came under Jahangir. It came only from the period of Shah Jahan onwards. Although we know that in the regional architecture, for example, in the region of Gujarat, it was from very early, say 14th century onwards, that we had minarets. But in North, somehow the minara was never taken to be a part of the mosque architecture at all. Gujarat was naturally one of the examples where the mosque architecture had minarets, and very developed minarets for that particular matter. We know that the Sultan of Gujarat was very much present in the Battle of Panipat at a time when Babur defeated Ibrahim Lodi. One of the Rajas, along with Ibrahim Lodi, who had been defeated, was the Sultan of Gujarat. Ultimately, he lost his empire, and then under Humayun attacked Gujarat, and Humayun, we can say that at least from Humayun's period, there were contacts with Gujarat, and ultimately Gujarat was conquered by Akbar. There were many inspirations which were borrowed from Gujarat architecture by the Mughals, but somehow the minaret was never borrowed, and the minaret for the first time starts only from the period of Shah Jahan. And I can also say that the culmination of minaret as part of the Mughal architecture only took place during the period of Aurangzeb. Yes, sir. Any other question?
Yes, I do have one question.
Yes, please go ahead.
Nadeem Saab, this is Razi from. I'm not a student of history, but
No, please go ahead.
Out of
I
interest.
mean, this was meant to be a lecture for those who are not experts.
All right. So I'm curious to know why the early sultans who basically had, I mean, heritage or they came from Central Asia. And in Central Asia at that time, a lot of mosques had the minaret or very visible domes in Bukhara, Samarkand, and all those areas. So when they came and established the Sultanate in Delhi, why the structure were not similar in that? I guess they were not similar. The mosques.
You are quite right. I mean, let me tell you one thing that, the Central Asian and Iranian influence was very heavy, both on the Sultanate architecture as well as Mughal architecture. But there is one another thing which is important to remember, and that is the topographical, climatic, differences between the two regions. In Central Asia, there was a typical type of architecture which was needed as per the climate. In India, the situation was quite different, number one. Number two, when these people came to India, they did not come along with their architects and masons. Some, engineers were there, but actual builders